Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 14th, for the NPM Technical Advisory Committee. It's called to order. Do we have any virtual attendance today? No. No. All right. Now, do we have a quorum? Yeah. All right. So first, we can all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So now we'll open the meeting for public comment, including comments on any agenda items. On the screen, you can see the 3 different ways that you can provide public comment or input to the TAC. All comments received will be shared with committee members and made part of the public record. Do we have any public comment cards?
No.
Don't think so.
No.
No, it's okay. I don't think we did. And remind you, I'll add one item that looks like we're gonna cancel the November meeting at the end. We'll have to do election of officers. This will be the last meeting of the year. So I would add that. Hopefully be taking place. I'll do that in January with you.
All right. So public comment. We can move on to approval of the minutes. Now time for agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes from our last technical advisory committee meeting on September 8th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the September meeting?
Second. Lisa.
All right, any discussions? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed by saying no.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So moving on to section 7 or 5. Sorry, trying to jump ahead. Action items. Next on the agenda, we have one action item today, 5A, which is the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan, and Ryan Brown with the MPO will present this item.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, today is the last day and final culmination of the last 2 years of working through the long range transportation plan. We'll thank our team for doing a great job over the last several years to get it to this point, and for all your work back and generous time spent on this effort. It's something that, you know, we're proud to put out there, and hopefully we'll continue to implement over the next several years. That being said, here's where we are, where we stand currently. We've spent the last 2 years working our way through systematically through this process, from socioeconomic data back in, I think, late 2022, working through our vision and scenarios, goals and objectives, understanding our needs, developing a revenue forecast, developing cost feasible plan, as well as our unfunded needs list. Then working through a 30-day public comment. We've got quite a few comments and work to implement those all the way up to next Monday, the adoption date of October 20th, which will be our new date 5 years from now. October 20th, 2030 will be our next required date to adopt the next LRTP. So I just wanted to give a little bit more information about the process itself, and I'll go through some of these main categories. Public involvement. Some of the messaging that we wanted to get out there and early and often was, you know, community empowerment, making it seem that, you know, this is your plan as much as it's ours. Making it multimodal. We've heard a lot from people over the last several years that walking, biking, using transit are just as important as getting around in the car. So making sure this was a multimodal experience for those involved. Being collaborative, it seems kind of standard in most plans, but it's truly something we tried to draw out more in this process, not only with you all as our partners, but our CAC, and anyone that we could get in touch with throughout the process. And then making it sure that we properly scaled and fully understood the impact and implications of what we're recommending in this plan. Really understanding our priorities over the next 25 years. It's not something that I think is easy, and one that there's a reason why it's redone every 5 years, is that we're not saying we're going to predict what it's going to be in 25 years, but making sure that our current priorities And our funding mechanisms are aligned with the vision that not only us as the MPO, but our community wants to see. So some of our public engagement that we undertook in all three phases of our plan, I say three phases, that those were loosely defined by our fiscal years. So we did come up with three separate phases. How we carried that out, visioning and scenarios. That was done through multiple events, but also at USF, Sarasota Manatee, as well as an outreach event in the Rosemary District. Phase 2 was our goals and objectives phase. Similarly, followed a survey, workshop, and outreach event. And then phase 3 was defining our local priorities. You were all heavily involved in that process, and then had a final outreach event at the Bishop, which we did have some great feedback from the public as well. Our main outreach tools, probably similar to the things that you all use, but we tried to make sure that we got out to various communities, understood the data behind who was responding to our surveys, making sure that we had comprehensive coverage of the region. Using our microsite was a first for the MPO, or our own URL, and having our standalone microsite, using campaign e-blast, social media, newsletters. Thank you, Grace, for doing those weekly newsletters. I know they're very informational. Public libraries, media releases, interviews on TV and radio were something new that we wanted to make sure that we got out there on our in different languages as well. David went out and spoke Spanish news station as well. So we tried to get out there and do as many different things as we could, and try to explain what the MPO does and why this is an important process. The main kind of bullet points here, as we've covered at length over the last several years, but working its way through systematically all the way up to the adoption next week. We did do our town tours process, and I think it's something that we'll continue to look at going forward as we begin implementing this plan. But we did spend the better part of a month back in early 2025 meeting with you all and hearing what your priorities were prior to determining what the cost feasible might look like. As I said, implementing is something that we really want to focus on, and I'll mention some of the studies we're working on here going forward. But we want to make sure we do this. Maybe it's not an annual trip, but maybe it's every other year. We want to continue to make sure that we're aligning what we do here with your priorities, policies, and then changing events. We know we have a changing board. You all do too. We want to make sure that we're staying aligned with what we're doing. The key phases. I know I won't bore you all with this. I know we've gone through this a lot. But really getting to understand our region as a whole, looking at now about 1.28 million people by the time we get out to 2050. Of course, that is subject to lots of different changing economic climates, growth climates, et cetera. But we do think, based off the data that's currently available, that we are going to see substantial growth east of 75 in the next year or so, projecting more population east of 75 than west for the first time in the history of our two counties. So very interesting changing times here. In Manatee and Sarasota County. Some of the scenarios that we kind of developed, we did grow a lot on what we've done previously in the 2045 plan, but also added in a resilient communities. I know we were all impacted greatly, not only at our jobs, but in our own communities over the last several years. So other major storm events, we wanted to make sure we were incorporating that into our planning process as well. And also maintaining our prior trends. We're looking at high value growth, creating vibrant places, and then also protecting the environmental health, which is, I'd say, our greatest asset here in the Sarasota Manatee region. So balancing our vision, I think we've heard that over the last, this will be my third looking at LRTPs, and it's always been a consistent message that, we want to create a balanced future. Not only do we don't just want to focus on environmental health at all costs. We don't want to just focus on growth at all costs. So how do we do that in a more succinct way? And some of those are recommended in these vision statements here below, looking at denser development patterns, focusing on infill, promoting resiliency, bolstering our transit options and service, expanding our multimodal options, looking at potential premium transit, and focusing on connectivity. Those are just some major underlying topics that we've heard throughout this process and things that we continue to emphasize. We took a different approach this time as well, looking at our visioning map. It's, I would say, more abstract in concept, but certainly the intent is to make sure that we're fully understanding where our focus areas are. They're split into those 5 categories there below. And they're overarching and matching with the LRTP's vision. Where do we think those most succinctly meet that? Also being aware of our environmentally sensitive areas. So this map, I hope you've all had a chance to review and take a look at, but the priorities are multimodal transportation needs, congestion, preserving our natural resources, focusing development on urban areas, and building durable infrastructure to withstand storms. Those fit those scenarios that I previously mentioned. And really just making sure we're recognizing the growth in the region that they're happening in. We don't want to, operate with our head buried in the sand and saying, well, we're just going to see growth west of 75. But we know that's not the current or existing trend. We want to make sure that we're aware of that while also balancing our other needs for the future. You probably know all these. I won't go into detail. Our goals and objectives were updated to with some new icons as well as meridian accessible language. In coloring, these match very closely what we did in the last long range plan, but were updated based off of other federal guidance that we were somewhat required to adhere to last year or so. One of the things I did want to point out was the relationship between some of these goals and the overall vision. We do build these charts. A lot of it is for federal highway and is mandated. I do think it's important to see what we're doing with it and how we align with the goals within the project, within the process. Also the types of preferred projects. We did get a lot of feedback during the public development process. The types of projects people wanted to see and implemented, and these are how the goals align directly with those as well. Before I jump into this, any questions on the kind of more subjective parts of the plan? Okay, hearing none. Revenue forecasts, I know we've gone over this kind of in depth in the last 6 to 8 months, but we did want to pull up the final numbers here for you all today and what we're looking at district-wide and MPO-wide. I will make a note that we have formally removed the carbon reduction program and funds from this revenue projecting process. We don't think that will be coming back anywhere in the near future. So that has been removed for projection purposes. Overall, I painted this picture, I think, before, but we are overall down about 50% from the 2045 revenue projections. The district is also held pretty stable year over year, not a lot of growth, but potentially keeping up with cost. I will say the one, next slide, the one kind of surprising fact is, it's about half of what both local governments and counties and cities are collecting in other revenue. While we're aware of, O&M and other costs that might go into these projections, it is still substantially higher than what's projected to be received by the NPO region in both federal and state funds. So these are standard. We've gone through these before. Overall, as I said, about a 50% decrease, but we have recognized that about 50% of local revenue will go to other debt service, operations, maintenance, and other infrastructure. So we're not saying that, all about $7 billion of that is going to infrastructure or to transportation specifically, but to other things as well. Developing the cost feasible was something we took through a longer process as well, took into account all of our completed work and studies, kind of a baseline of projects that could potentially be incorporated. Our meetings with you all, as previously mentioned on the town tours, our workshops, our outreach events, our surveys, and then a technical review with you all in June and July. All in all, what is the cost feasible plan? I'll cover this briefly again as well. To complete a pipeline of projects is a requirement. So projects that were identified that were already in some form of project development. They can be in any phase at this point, from planning all the way up through design, construction, right away. But it is something that we need to create to show construction being completed within the horizon of the plan. We also took a different approach. Instead of having just boxed funds with no limits, we've also created multimodal and improvement programs, which are confined to the revenue projections that we previously showed, as well as proportional funding. It's basically a cost efficiency practice that recognizes the benefit and cost relationship to the certain types of improvements. So if it was certainly outweighed by cost, we took that into account of what the benefit might be to that as well, and vice versa. If it was too costly, that was taken into account in the programming process. I will say, additionally, the need capacity improvements is recognized and facilities identified for funding and implementation by DOT and local jurisdictions. This is not the LRTP is not intended to be a complete comprehensive look at everything you might all do in your CIPs, for example, or what the state might do on the state highway program. This is specifically for the revenue projected for our MPO region. So I'll dive in. This is, I think, kind of the meat of the LRTP itself. dive into the pipeline, as well as the program types that we've come up with. Program projects, 31 in total. From the state highway system, level 11 local, did our best to kind of create a more comprehensive and systematic approach to this. They are spread fairly equitably across the region. Source of these, as mentioned before, our 2045 effort, a lot of your local priorities, as well as some other studies that were identified throughout the process, LECOM and VODA, as well as the SIS cost useful plan. Some of the major ones that were just highlights off the top. I'm working with DOT on creating an ATMS master plan that will be implemented region-wide. 789 Lombok Key Merg, the Boulevard of the Arts, US 41 Orange. These are just some of the types of projects to give you an idea of things that are taking place in the pipeline. So things that have the phase currently funded that we're continuing to move forward through construction. Roadway capacity, as to no one's surprise, these are kind of few and far between. They're extremely expensive and take up a large portion of our state highway funding. So you'll see kind of even split 4 projects in the state highway system, 4 on local roadways. Base and source of these were our local needs as brought forward by you all, as well as things that were previously identified in the 2045 cost useful plan. Example of these, State Road 72, 575 the Rain, Fort Hamer Bridge, Upper Manatee River Road. These types of projects are long-term investments and significantly cost. Our intersection program really identified areas where we can see improved and marked efficiency at certain intersections. 9 of these are on the state highway system. Shouldn't be much of a surprise where we have a larger number of failing intersections, as well as 2 on local roadways. LECOM, same thing, LECOM and VODA, as well as local needs in the 2045 are the source of these. A few examples are a number of roundabouts, 41 or Myrtle and MLK, 9th Street, and 64 at Gulf Drive. All are improvements that have been either requested or discussed with local agencies. Our resiliency program, once again, these were also, to most people's surprisingly, very expensive and typically require substantial remodeling or redesign of the roadway. Vast majority of these are also on the state highway system. A few examples, US 301 up in Palmetto, 681 out by the interstate, Sutter Boulevard down in Northport. And the vast majority of the source of it, some feedback from you all as well, but also our NPO's resilience and vulnerability assessment. The multimodal program, one of the larger programs and a substantial user of the SU and TA funds. The vast majority of these, we wanted to make sure our funding was being utilized on your local efforts. So you can see 17 of these projects are local, 3 being on the state highway system. These came out of the Active Transportation Plan at Smith, varying different types of other local regional studies. Examples of these, Palmetto Trails Network, Venice Ave, Lockwood Ridge, several of these other projects that are continuing to be moving forward for bike ped improvement. The safety program, based on our high injury network, congestion management process, local needs, and the previous cost feasible. No one's surprised, 25 and 27 on the state highway network. It's where the vast majority of our serious injuries and fatalities occur. Some of those major ones, US 41, 14, Cortez, Bee Ridge, those all shouldn't, I think, come as a surprise to you all. And lastly, the TSM&O program. We want to continue to build out the system that we've kind of worked on. We had our congestion management process, which had a TSM&O element within the Bear Island Transportation Implementation Plan, as well as the local needs in 2045. We want to continue to build out the heart of the network, as you can see there. We'll also be working hand in hand with the department, the ATMS master plan, to make sure that these corridors are still efficient, comprehensive, and cooperative with what we're all doing. One project spotlight is the transit signal priority implementation, which is now underway. We'll continue to see how that develops and builds. So with that, I will take any questions you might have on LRTP, anything like that.
Any questions for Ryan? All right, and I will entertain a motion to recommend the MPO board adoption of the 2050 long range transportation plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right. Second.
Okay.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying nay. Right, the motion passes. Next, we'll move on to item 6, presentations. First, 6A, the FDOT report of the 5-year work program overview. This will be provided by Pam Barr.
Good morning. Pardon me for not standing. Sometimes that gets a little cumbersome. What we're going to do is present a video. Every year we do a work program, a 5-year work program, which takes in the 5-year plan, we take off the first year that you're currently in and we add a new year in. And it's in this program that we do our programming of projects that are going to need funding. And right, that we keep track of the progression of the projects. There are several phases that we have to go through for each project. We have our PD&Es, and we have our design, and then we have right of way, and we have construction, and we have what we call CEI and maintenance afterwards. And each phase of the project takes approximately 2 years, which actually, if you say, oh, you got 5 phases, you've got 2 years apiece, that's 10 years. So we're only getting the first part of that in the 5-year work program. So you might see some projects coming in and some projects coming off. So we have a video. It will explain more of the work program and how it works. So do you have the video queued? Okay, so we are currently finishing up our fiscal year 2027-2031 tentative work program. And this will go through a public hearing. So the public hearing for this year is October 20th, which is a Monday, through October 24th, which is a Friday. There'll be a face-to-face meeting held on the 24th, which is a Friday, at both our Swale office, which is off Daniels Parkway in Fort Myers, and in our Bartow's headquarters, which is in Bartow. And these face-to-face meetings will be held at 11 a.m. And if you need further information, you can contact me and I'll make sure that you get it. Or the MPO will also have that information and they can supply it to you. And it is during this that it goes through the public hearing prior to being adjusted for the next year. And this will show you the funding. We also will have a summary of changes and there will be a citizens advisory report.
Yeah, and we have, and got those to us yesterday, so we're in the process of doing, we'll make sure we get up to you all the next week or so. So any comments you might have, we're happy to take them, either myself or Pam can pass them along.
Okay.
I think I missed part of that, so you have the draft tentative
Just
now?
got it.
They just came out, we just did the snapshot. There still are some things that are being adjusted at this point in time. But it's the major part of it is been completed. And the summary of changes have been done. So we are working forward because this will go to the legislatures. Once everything is done, they'll put everything together to take it to the state.
Okay, so distributed this week, public input all next week, basically.
On October 20th through the 24th.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Our next item is that is Smith Mobility Study. Ryan Suarez and Julie Horner Associates will present on this item.
Did you want to say anything?
No.
Good morning, everyone. Ryan Suarez with Kilmore is noted on the slide. Today, it's been a while since I got up in front of this group and talked about the project, so we're gonna give you a little status on what's been accomplished. We're gonna focus here, it says quarter by quarter deliverables, and there is a reason for that. I'll explain that into the presentation. We'll talk about next steps as well. So I think last we met was probably in May. Since we last met, it looks like a short list, it is, but there's a lot that went into each one of those bullets that's there, including the toolkit. I'll describe that here in just a second. We have coordinated with city, county staff, and also attempted to do some neighborhood outreach with the Park East neighborhood as well. And the result is really quarter by quarter projects. And in your packets, I believe you have some graphics which really summarize what those projects are. So I'll delve into that again in just a second. In terms of project schedule, this is the original project schedule, so we've been keeping to it. That's great in terms of a lot of times our planning projects. And again, I think a lot of that drive is because of the ORPG process and maintaining consistency with what's being included there. So just as a reminder to the group, there might be some new faces that haven't seen this or know where the study area is. For those that are familiar, Ed Smith stands right smack in the middle of this study area, 17th Street to the north, Fruitville Road to the south, the Neva to the east, and then US 301 to the west. The color coding really relates to city, county, and state corridors. We have a broad service area, and in order for us to organize recommendations and projects, it was best for us to really do it by corridor in this manner. So I think it's about, it's as you see, 4 county corridors, Tuttle, Lockwood Ridge, Benita 17, the 2 state roads, US 301, Fruitville, and the remaining balance encompasses about 7 city roadways. The toolkit, you should probably see a lot of toolkits. I think there's someone for the active transportation plan. I think the lead comp study also developed a toolkit. Our toolkit here is specific to our study area and specific to our study area of recommendations. In other words, all the recommendations that are included or that have been made for our quarters. They are described and illustrated here in our toolkit. So there's nothing outside this toolkit that isn't being recommended. And the way this works is we've got an ID number, description, and an improvement time for each item. A general, a relative graphic illustration of time and cost for each type of improvement. And also we did our best to find Sarasota County specific images. So again, this is important because we're trying to keep the things that are tried and true and already implemented within the community. So that way it's just easier for folks to kind of understand, their application. So there are a few that are outstanding, and we did our best to kind of keep everything within the Tampa Bay as well. So the toolkit is tied to projects and it's tied to other elements. We're trying to wrap this up nice and tight so that it all makes sense for the estimated stage study itself. So last we met, we went through a lot of data. Actually, didn't go through all of the data because we just can't go through all of it with the group. But the idea here is to convey the message. There's a lot of information that was collected that funneled into our quarter by quarter projects. In the packet, I believe you have a graphic. We did not supply the table. And what you see here is kind of companion deliverables. There's a lot of projects in here. And this was important because as we got into identifying projects, we're always trying to think of implementation, what are those low-hanging fruit. If we gave you just broad, high-level recommendations, a lot of times that's a lot more difficult to move into a phase where it can actually happen and get done. So the detail by intersection and then rolled up into segment by segment within the tables. Yes, they're illustrated here on the graphic. Again, they kind of work together. But the important piece here is to think about this in terms of short-term, mid-term, long-term service improvements, and also what are low-cost items that can be done right away, such as maybe restriping a crosswalk. Long-term improvements would be things that are like, okay, we need a multi-use trail, something like that, right? So hence the organization that's here, and hence the reason why it's probably a lot to go through with this group. What we're gonna do, there is a separate item that is under, it's actually prepared, but we do have a dashboard. It's a handy, fancy dashboard by which you can query by location, by segment, and then by project type. Think of that you all use Power BI where you can kind of query and drill down into that's the same idea here. So folks can go into their specific intersection, segment, or location of interest and see the recommended projects that are being proposed for that site, for that place. And I think what we're going to do, we're going to work with staff to decide whether we embed that in the existing story map or just add a link on the project page. So that way everyone has access and can see, view, and then circle back and provide to us comment. Now, important here, we have coordinated with City of Sarasota staff and county staff on a lot of these projects. So we wouldn't publish them if they haven't been vetted in some manner. But again, for the group and for others, we're going to make this presentation to, I'm sure folks are curious, want to know, want to see it, want to review it. We'll share that with everyone. If not, by the end of the week, definitely early next week. Okay. One of the things that we were asked to do was also, hey, okay, what's transformational? If you did include a full build out for specific corridors and locations, what's that going to look like? Kimberly Horn, prepare some renderings. We have a good graphics team that can do some fancy things and some software that I am not familiar with. And I'm going to give you some 4 examples here of some of these. So it's a compilation of different improvement types and with the before and after here. So this is as listed, 17th Street. I think it's just a little bit east of Euclid, looking westbound to the north. There's that electrical supply building over here. For 17th Street, and to be more specific, again, trying to tie this to the toolkit. We've got this additional graphic, which includes a legend, and through this ABC nomenclature, kind of ties those improvements and shows their location on the visual. So in this particular section of 17th Street, we do have a little bit more space on the south side. So there's a wider sidewalk that means anything greater than 5 feet. The addition of the medians is an important one. There is probably gonna have to be some type of access management exercise here to understand ingress, egress along 17th and all the driveways that are in there, but we do feel that with some medians, we can facilitate some pedestrian movements and some mid-block crossings along the stretch of 17th. Yes, sir.
The space between sidewalk and the pavement marking is a bike lane, or bike lane is on the sidewalk?
I think this one here is about 8 feet, so we did take the liberty to add a bike in the image in the graphic, so that way it would be used by both.
Okay,
But to answer the question, there's no on-road bike lane here,
There's
so
no-
it looks too narrow.
There is a striped bike lane on 17th all the way, I wanna say, for most
So
of
you
that
re-
stretch.
So you repurpose the bike lane, the existing bike lane, in this
Yes,
concept.
yes,
That's,
yes,
that's what needs to be clear.
Thank you for speaking it here. Yes, thank you. We rode 17th. 17th 's a high stress bike roadway. Even though there are facilities striped out for it, we just didn't feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this is a type of facility that's available for all types of users, stuff like that. So to separate that off and away from other vehicle traffic, we feel is a better way to do it. Good question, by the way.
thank you.
Let's go to shade. So this is Shade Avenue, an unpaved section of shade looking northbound. For those who are familiar, Aspenwall. Certain sections of shade are paved, going through very residential sections of the neighborhood. And then there's other sections which just have, as you can see, they're just unpaved at this point. So in this case, we have a multi-use trail such as the 8th Street walkway. This is just a wide paved facility for pedestrians and bike users to travel through here, some improved landscaping and then lighting to enhance safety. Now, shade is one of the quarters on the city's multimodal quarter connections plan. I'm so sorry, I butchered that one. And it is one of the higher priorities, I believe, right now. I think is complete streets still, is that still safe to use as a term? Okay. So it is targeted for multimodal transportation.
Context sensitive solutions.
Okay, exactly.
I'm gonna say this is a safe space.
But it is targeted for computation, context sensitive solutions, and the idea is to connect, at least in our study area, it does, in the plan, in the city plan, it does cover from Bill all the way up to 15. So. Last one here is Lockwood Ridge. And we did go back and forth with staff in terms of Lockwood Ridge as a north-south, another north-south connection for multimodal transportation purposes. And what you see here, I'll just go straight to the labeled graphic. Now, in terms of the LOS information and future travel that Lockwood Ridge, per the model will experience, there really wasn't a need at this point to add additional capacity. So we're taking advantage of the right of way that's available there to create the buffer multi-use path that you see here on the east side. The buffering, you'll see is that E label with the street trees and the landscaping. We do have enough right of way for most of Lockwood Ridge to be able to facilitate this type of infrastructure and still maintain some sidewalk space on the west side. So there's just a couple of parcels that encroach into the space that we might need. But by and large, again, between Fruitville and our northernmost boundary for our study area, 17. This is the recommendation. Any thoughts on this? We have more renderings and graphics to prepare. We're still working through those. So again, this is, I probably should have put this slide after the table and graphic, but this is what the dashboard looks like. Again, we'll send you the link. This link's not working for everybody. It's closed. So we'll make it public, but there's tools in here that you can filter down by intersection, by segment, and be able to cue in on specific locations and read a list of improvements that are being proposed. The next steps, we're cleaning up the prioritization. This was something that was impressed upon us by county staff, and we do appreciate that because we do understand that as project sponsors, how do these projects rank? If there were going to be some NPO, so we are using the NPO prioritization tool to be able to rank our projects, and we're doing this by corridor and by segment. So we're cutting up those long corridors a little bit based on some land use and operating characteristics. By intersection, I know because I think this is important, going back to what I mentioned about the low hanging fruit. Actually, I'm going to give credit to the city staff. We have a lot of improvements that are just simply, hey, let's just repave these crosswalks. They took the initiative to use the click to fix tool and just upload those up so that city staff, if there's money available and time and resources, those can be done right away. So those are quick wins, and I've always, I'm always trying to think of ways. We're always trying to think of ways of how to get to the end game here. And I think that was something that's come out of this that I think is pretty cool. So cost estimates, those are under development as well, and they'll be included in our draft plan. Our plan here, I think that's the last slide, is to, based on comments received, yes, we'll make some revisions, but we'll hope to close on the draft report and submit that to staff. Maybe if all goes well by the end of next month, Thanksgiving. So again, we're on schedule and we're on track. We'll open up the dashboard and make that public once we kind of fine tune and work out the details. So does anyone have any questions? Can't get any interruptions except for Marvin, and that's great. So please, anyone else have any thoughts? Concerns? Yes, Clark.
So for the project prioritization, in the backing up to it, the toolkit has what you could call cost and complexity, the dollars and the time involved to implement it. Is that a consideration in the priority, or are there some things that are, say, low cost, low complexity that you can just do, like the improved crossings and things like that, that regardless of priority, they might jump to the head of the line, and then you might have a very high priority that just like rebuilding Lockwood Ridge Road that's going to cost a lot, take a while to design, that really important, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years to realize something like that. I mean, how will all of that figure into what you're doing in terms of your priority recommendations?
Oh, that's a good question. The prioritization really, that's based segment by segment, and it's based on the criteria that the NPO has established within the tool, right? So that's really those probably high level, long term within our toolkit, and then that's tied to table by numbering for all the different improvement types. That's the way to kind of pull out the things that are low hanging fruit and then perhaps can be implemented much sooner. To facilitate that, we may have to build more into that last section of our report that organizes short-term, midterm and long-term projects. That way, there's a better distinction between the prioritization that's being done by segment using the MK tool and those smaller projects that perhaps a lot of them are like intersection projects that are much smaller in scale.
And then I have one comment, and it's on the graphics that were provided with the packet today, and it's these, but in color, they look great on the screen. And if you've got color vision, but if they get reproduced in black and white or even printed in color, they're pretty tough because they use transparent color. So my recommendation would be consider some symbology that makes it more accessible for those.
I think what we may do is remove the aerial, and that'll make it less busy in the background. That way we can add a different type of color palette or pattern that stands out.
Right.
And it probably will reduce the size of the files too. So. Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, our next item is 6BII, the 2026 call for projects. See where here?
Good morning. So this is just to say that following the adoption of the LRTP next week, we will open the 2026 call for projects. We're not ready to do that just yet. We didn't want to jump the gun for the adoption, so that is forthcoming. The process will be exactly the same as it has been in previous years. The application process will go through MPO staff. You'll submit it to us via email per usual. We'll use the online scoring tool as we had in previous years as well. Staff is doing some work on the back end to build prioritization into FICO Interactive, which is currently hosting our interactive TIP. But we're not quite ready to roll that out with the entire TAC as a whole. So this year, staff will take that over, and then we'll present that to you all next year with the major update. We're looking to close the call for projects probably around the end of the year. And that will give staff enough time to look at the applications, look at the scoring, and develop a draft list for the TAC meeting in January next year. So it'll be a quick 2 months, but hopefully with this notice, you can take a look at what projects you would like to start preparing for the call for projects. Towards the end of September, we had that virtual workshop to look at the scoring for the prioritization update. If you look at this scoring tool recently, you'll see that the update has not yet been made because the tool is currently being used for the XFIT project. So we'll be wrapping that up very shortly. We'll be doing that update and it will be ready to go for when we open the call for projects. So that is coming your way. So this is just informational to let you know. I'll take any questions. Otherwise, keep an eye out for an email from staff with all the instructions for the call for projects.
So would it upset things greatly if we didn't get local government formal approval of the list till sometime in January?
Well, we usually anticipate the local approvals in February, and knowing that it comes after the draft list is already developed. That's fine.
So can we use the same projects from the last year, or is there any restriction on number of projects we have to submit?
The only restriction would be to ensure that it's eligible, and which means it's consistent with the 2050 long range plan. So if the project is identified in the 2050 LRTP and you have access to those project lists now, then it's something that you'll be able to submit. And looking at the 2025 list, you'll know which projects are eligible and which projects are not eligible.
Okay.
So we can work with you to determine which those projects are.
Any other questions? And goes to our last item under 6BIII, upcoming planning studies. On this item.
And this is just similar, it's just informational for you all. As you know, we went through the process in the last year to bring on an additional 3 new planning consultants. So a little bit different this time around. We're looking at our upcoming efforts. You can see there listed on the cover sheet. The five, I know we've probably talked to them at length with you all in the past, but we want to give you an update. We're currently in the process of taking approaches from each of our consulting teams that have interest in these efforts. And we're hearing them out, and we're having conversations back and forth about what we'd like to see, and then as well as their ideas and how we can kind of blend those together to come up with a cohesive scope. So once we do that and select the team, we'll bring those and provide those to you all as well, and your feedback you might have and get these underway. The vast majority of these we're hoping to get kicked off here in late 2025, potentially early 26. Certainly keep you all apprised during the process for each of these. The one that I really would probably draw out, as Nina said, the project priorities and prioritization update. That will be a full evaluation of our existing process. As Nina said, we did that interim update to the scoring to match any of the new information that we might have related to data or any changes done at the federal level that we need to take care of and adapt to. But the rest will be kind of more fully blown out, studies that'll really dive into some things that we think are important in implementing our long-range plan. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have. This is just more information for you all to know where we are. You'll be seeing a number of scopes as well as potentially new planning teams here with us working with some of these things.
Can you say a little bit more about freight and transit feasibility?
Sure.
Broad, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Both are, I think, things that we had noted as shallow points, might I say, in our existing long range plan. We wanted to take a deeper dive into specifically what that meant. Right now, we're hearing just different approaches, especially on the freight front. Our approach, at least what I want to see, is what we can do to support our largest facilities, right? So 301 out here, the port, the airport, where do they stand with their growth, their projections? How can we support them on the built environment side, on the infrastructure side? It's not something that MPO has done a lot of in the past. I think we've just naturally said, here's the thing that fits our priority criteria. And we kind of go and plan our projects from there. We want to make sure that we're addressing our growth areas in the necessary way. And we're kind of all ears right now. We're working, as I said, we've got 3 proposals back on that front, and we're going to kind of be narrowing down what we think are the best elements from each of those and applying that into a singular scope. So more to come and probably some changes. Dave, I think would be remiss if I didn't add that, while this will be adopted in October, kind of all fingers crossed to see what happens to the next authorization at the federal level. There might be some other changes that come with these programs and these studies. So being adaptable and potentially having to amend portions of the long range plan to better align with federal goals and policy, something we have to keep an eye on as well. So I would say it's a formalization of our approach for freight as well as transit, potentially looking at how we can create greater efficiencies. I know we've already had a good conversation, Megan Breeze, and we'll speak with MCAT as well on what that means for transit, but looking at alternative modes of transit as well, not just our fixed line service, but also water taxis, which we had a presentation on in our last board meeting, potentially rail down the line, seeing how we can support that as well. Maybe by the time I retire, that would be the plan. Anything else? What about you?
Any questions for days? All right, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
I think now we'll shift into the new additional agenda item that Ryan mentioned earlier, the election of officers. Should I turn that over to you to?
Well,
Just.
yeah, I'll say that. You can go.
Since the November round of meetings will be canceled, we want to do the election at this meeting, which is going in on the agenda. Since this year's chair was out of Manatee County, the chair moving forward for the next year should be a representative out of Sarasota County, so Sarasota County or any of the jurisdictions. And then similarly for the vice chair, should be a representative out of Manatee County, any of the jurisdictions. I believe Longboat Key counts for either. So with that, our current chair is Jamie of the City of Bradenton. So we're looking for a new chair for 2026 and out of Sarasota, Longboat Key, or any of the other jurisdictions.
or you can make the recommendation that Megan just got started a little early this year. To make the recommendation that Megan is the chair.
So any volunteers, nominations, or a recommendation you want to move our vice chair to chair?
If she's willing, I'd nominate Megan to be our chair for the coming year.
Okay. Megan has accepted. Do we take a formal vote?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, congratulations, Chair.
Yep, now I need to, whoever, yes, as Nina said, a vice chair, representative of Manatee County, any jurisdiction within, that includes Hoboken as well. Any volunteers or nominations for that?
If he's willing, I'd nominate Jake, the Manatee County.
I appreciate that. I want to decline because I am likely moving positions within the city and beyond. Come January.
Right. Sorry, CP.
Nominate Clark.
It's pretty well for you to staff. I'll leave the floor open. Any other nominations of volunteers before we close? All right, and all in favor for Clark as the new vice chair?
Aye.
Right, any opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
that brings us to our last, our last item, what's around the table. So we'll go around if you have any updates you'd like to share, comments, so what?
Southern County is undertaking a thoroughfare plan review. We've had a consultant on board. The board wants us to take a holistic view of our thoroughfare plans and see where we might need some changes. And one road, Keyway Road, which is from State Road 776 east towards Northport. The board wants us to take it out of the thoroughfare plan, but by rule, we have to get a consultant on board to look at it. So that's being undertaken. That's all I have to share. I don't have anything.
I don't have anything either. I want to let you know that next Tuesday, between 5 and 6:30 p.m. at the Manatee County Fairgrounds Veterans Hall, there will be a public meeting for project 444904-1, which is US 41 8th Avenue West pedestrian mid-block crossing. So if you're interested in that project, there is a public meeting next Tuesday between 5 and 6:30 p.m. If you have any questions, let me know.
Which jurisdiction is that is?
Palmetto.
Pardon?
City of Palmetto. Which jurisdiction?
It just says Manatee County Fairgrounds, Veterans Hall.
City of Palmetto.
That's in Palmetto.
It's been Palmetto then.
Right, okay,
Okay.
because there was a project on 8 in Bradenton a few years ago already.
Yeah.
This is project.
4904-1.
Yes.
Right. City of Sarasota is updating the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan. Next week, we have 3 open houses around the city. This is to show the draft action strategies of the comp plan. So if you work, live, play, City of Sarasota, I welcome you to attend. The first one is October 21st. At the Harvest Tabernacle on 17th Street. The second one is October 22nd at Robert Dale Taylor on MLK. No, sorry, Myrtle. And then the third one is October 23rd at St. Armand's Lutheran Church. All 3 of them are 5 to 7. The materials are the same, so they're all across the city. We hope that you attend.
Nothing, thank you.
The city of Palmetto just completed some RFQ requests, presentations, and what we haven't formally made any contracts with the consultants we do have. It does look like we're finally moving forward on some 10th Street, complete street projects. So that's exciting for the city. And as suggested, I may be transitioning roles in the city. So that again is not yet perfect, but once that happens, we'll see in the face to see.
All right, thank you all for attending. Just make sure, so we'll adjourn this meeting today. Do you have something? Carl?
No, I think Ryan said at the beginning, we're finished for the year.
Correct, yes. It's all dependent on how the day went, but yes, we will be canceling both the board and the TAC CAC meetings in November. They were as hold on tentative. We don't want to make you go to 3 meetings in a row or back to back months, so we will be pulling those off today. Yeah, we'll be back as regularly scheduled in January next year. Yep.
A location to be determined or anything here?
If it's not in the new building by then, something went wrong. So by January, we should be at our new location, ready to move. Last day, probably our last day we have to be out of here by December 16th. We're going over in an hour to do the final walkthrough of the space. So we should be moving the next several months, getting everything out of here and over there.
So we at the office park there at the southeast. Quadrant.
63rd Street East, yeah, right over there, right across from
70, right?
yeah, right over there across from Braid River and see, yeah, right.
So the meeting is adjourned at 11:03.